I want to talk to you about the importance of chasing your dreams and sometimes going beyond what most people might consider to be comfortable. I believe if you're not living on the edge, that you perhaps could be taking up too much room. I believe that life is meant to be a daring adventure or nothing. It shouldn't be a bore. But many of us have been conditioned into this safety lifestyle, this perhaps belief that security is what matters and that we shouldn't perhaps take too much of a risk. I have a different view to that. I'm not suggesting that you should be reckless. I believe you should take intelligent risks, but I believe that you should push yourself to the edges of your potential, because that's where your growth and happiness and joy and prosperity and adventure really lies. I want to talk about what it takes and why you should, maybe from today, start living a more daring life, maybe a more adventurous, maybe a more curious lifestyle. At the age of 15, John Goddard overheard his father and a friend having a conversation. John's father's friend was confiding in John's father, and he said that he wished that he was John's age because he wished he had the opportunity to live his dreams again, that he wished that he had a second chance to do what he really wanted to do. Now, both men, as you would imagine, were quite elderly and they had families. But this visitor was saying that he wasn't really happy with life. John, from the sound of his voice and from what he said, realized that there was some level of regret in what he was saying. And that inspired John. You see, regret is one of the deadliest emotions that any of us should have. That inspired John, and John sat down and asked himself a real simple question. How would I have to live my life so that when I get to my father's friend's age or my father's age, that I can look back at my life and say with absolute conviction that I had a fascinating life? Now, John started doing something really interesting. He started developing desires about things he wanted to do. He captured those in writing and they became goals. He called those goals my life lists. He had 127 goals that he had captured. Now, remember, this young boy was aged 15. Out of the 127 goals that he wrote down, by the time he had achieved, by the time he had got to an age of roughly about 42, he had achieved about 90% or 95% of those goals. But in addition to all those goals, he had achieved a lot more. But of the original 127, he had achieved roughly about 111 of all of those goals. What I find inspiring in that story is this. Number one, John had a dream. That dream was born out of a desire. That desire was in some way triggered out of what he had perceived to be regret in another person's life. You see, you and I were raised to live the cautious, the comfortable, the secure lifestyle. And what I want to put across to you today is that the best life that you could have could be waiting for you. But unfortunately, it might just be beyond the edge of your perhaps experience, perhaps the edges of what you might consider comfortable. And until you push beyond, in other words, until you color out of the lines, you may never find out who you really are. Now, I believe genuinely that we all have a potential that is unlimited. But I don't know what unlimited means. Now, you don't know what unlimited means. We've never experienced that before. However, to understand the level of that potential that we have, one of the things you and I have to do is set goals. The reason for goals is not to get things. You don't set goals to achieve or to get. That is of secondary importance. The primary reason and purpose for setting a goal is to discover what your potential really is. Because by setting a goal, you now have to develop yourself by skill, by knowledge, by experience, by study, by wisdom. You have to develop yourself to become the kind of person deserving of the goal. And in doing that, what happens is that you raise your level of awareness, you raise your level of consciousness, you increase your wisdom, you increase your experience. And interestingly, all of those form and fashion new habits that you develop, and those habits form your character. So, even when you achieve the goal, you've now become a person of character, a person of the right attitude, a person of the right behavior, who has the ability to reproduce the goal. So setting goals is simply so you can understand what you're capable of achieving. The potential is unlimited, but between here and unlimited potentiality, you have goals you have to set. And I believe you and I should perhaps welcome that lifestyle of dreaming, setting goals, of developing desires, of going beyond what most people might consider, perhaps comfortable. I'll give you a bit of a background about myself. I started my journey so many years ago. I'm born and bred African Nigerian. I came to the United Kingdom at a young age. But I had to leave the comfort of my home, my family, my friends, my environment, what I had always called home, in pursuit of a dream. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. I had to let go of what I knew, and I had evidence that was really comfortable, that had worked for me, for a future that was uncertain, with no promises. You see, the future comes, in some cases, with a promise. You have to design that promise yourself. Now, when I started my journey, no one gave me a promise. I had to sit down, use my imagination, come up with an idea, develop a desire, convert that desire into a goal, create that goal into something that I believed I could achieve. That became my promise. So I had to design my own promise. And one of those promises I made to myself was that if I took the journey that I was about to take, that I might discover someone within that I'd never met before. I might also discover a life that was very different to the life I already had, and that life could be much better than where I was. And that was what I needed, hope. That hope, combined with my goals and my vision, developed into inspiration. I was inspired enough to take a leap of faith, to go to the unknown, to leave the known world that I was always accustomed to a world that I knew nothing about. Now, I remember very well arriving in the United Kingdom, a new world, different environment, no friends, no family, no support, but I had a dream. Now, in many cases, most people do not take that leap of faith because of fear of success. In many cases, the fear of failure. What if things don't work out? I found it easy, in my case, simply because I had resolved in my heart that there was no such thing as failure. That failure was simply practice shots. Failure was simply feedback. That failure was simply a way of me building myself to become who I should be. And that for me to achieve success, that I needed to go through a learning experience. And unfortunately, people call that learning experience failure. And I had to simply reframe that word, failure. And I chose a word that was more, perhaps, in tune with who I wanted to be, and I called it feedback. Now, by reframing the word failure, the fear of failure disappeared. I now saw my journey as an adventure. One of the decisions I had to make, and this is one of the decisions you're going to have to make, is you have to see life as an adventure. And for many people, that adventure is scary because they see life as a jungle. Now remember that the jungle is neutral. Life is neutral. If you see yourself as someone who is going to go on that journey alone, independent, then yes, you should be terrified. But if you see yourself as someone who is going to perhaps meet a few people, and you're going to find people who disagree with your point of view, find people who have different points of view in terms of how they think, understand how they see life, learn from those who are worth learning from, rather than learning from your experiences alone. Sit under the feet of someone who is perhaps successful and who's achieved what you're trying to achieve, and be willing to navigate through the journey, through the jungle, with others, whilst you're looking out for them and they're looking out for you. You have a much higher chance of success than if you do it alone. And that was one of the things that I had to do. I knew I was coming into a location that I knew no one, but I knew for a fact that there are two ways of learning in life. You can learn from your experiences. I should say you can learn from your mistakes, or you can learn from mentors. I made a decision that I would learn both from my experiences, but I would combine my experiences by reading, studying other successful people, and I would perhaps model myself on their success. That was quite easy to do. Why? Because success leaves behind clues. And the best way to achieve success is to find success, study it, and replicate it. Model what works and let go of what doesn't work. And let me bring you back to what I started with when we started this session, which is about taking a risk and living on the edge. All of my life, I've always found that whenever I get to a point where I find myself to be comfortable, that I stop growing and life becomes a bore. What I want to put across to you is this. I want you to imagine right now that you're perhaps 85 years old and you're sitting on a rocking chair and you look back at your life and someone says to you to give an account, perhaps write a story about your life. What would you capture in that story? What would be the highlights of your experience through life? What would be perhaps your successes? But more importantly, what would you identify as some of the regrets that you have? Now, and we all have some level of regret, things that we should have done but we didn't. But if you do have a long list of regrets, and if you feel like most people do when they get to the end of their lives, they look back and they say, what if I was wrong? What if I could have lived a different life? If you find yourself to be in that category of people, then it's simply an indication of life saying to you that you have to change. That for things to get better, you have to get better. For you to discover your real self, you have to be willing to go to the edge. And sometimes you don't even have to take a leap. You just simply have to go to the edge and stand on the edge and let that feeling, the feeling knowing I can jump and I am ready to jump. But I don't have to. But if you choose to, you could. And I find that experience to be liberating. If you find yourself in the category of people who perhaps might say, I wish I had done something different, perhaps I wish I had tried, perhaps I wish I had lived a different life, then I want to encourage you not to take a leap immediately, but I want to encourage you to go back to the drawing board and capture what you would wish that life could have been. Capture those ideas, capture those ideals. Now, someone once said that an ideal is an idea that you are in love with. We all have desires. Capture your desires as goals. Put it in writing. And simply ask yourself the question, who would I have to become to achieve these goals? And what would I have to do to achieve the goals? And what I want you to do is this. I want you to just take one step. Every day, take one step. Every day, take another step. And you see, every step you take puts you on the pathway to success. Earl Nightingale said that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, of a worthy goal. That if you know where you are right now, and you know exactly where you want to be, and you're moving in a direction, it could be one step, or half a step. But if you're moving in the direction of that ideal destination, you're successful. So that at the end of our journey, this beautiful journey we call life, you and I can sit back and say, what an experience. I want to encourage you, whatever you may want from life, life would offer to you whatever you want if you're willing to pay the price. Now, I'll also encourage you to qualify, the living on the edge and put in context in every category of life. Perhaps you have a passion that you want to fulfill. Perhaps you believe you know what your purpose is. Yes, you can take a risk, but it should be a calculated risk. In your relationship, perhaps you're not as happy as you would want to be. Yes, you can take a risk, but it's important you do a very, very calculated analysis of the risks and the rewards and make the right choice. Taking a leap of faith should be viewed and should be applied with wisdom, depending on the area of your life and the category of your life. In business, you need some level of financial intelligence. Relationship, you need to understand yourself, but also you need to understand the consequences. In health, so in all areas of your life, I want you to have the best that you want for yourself, but I want you to have the wisdom to know when to make the right decisions and make intelligent choices. But more than anything, comfort has a way of diminishing our desire to achieve more, to be more, to do more. And you and I must, at some point, break out of the what I call the chains of security and the chains of comfort, and break out for freedom, because you and I are here in this short journey we call life to gather as many experiences as we can. We're meant to take all the experiences and they become colors, and upon what we call life, which is like a canvas, a blank canvas, we're meant to paint our masterpiece, our experiences in this journey we call life. King Solomon said that there's a time to laugh, and there's a time to cry, and there's a time to be born, and also there is a time to die. What you and I have to ensure is that from the point where we're born to the point where the journey we have comes to an end, that we have experiences and moments that are so beautiful that we can look back at the end of our journey and say, whoa, what an experience.